Good morning. It is 10:50 a.m. on Sunday, September 8th, 2019. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. And because today is Sunday, I am concluding my rewatch of Gravity Falls by talking about the big 2-part finale, or double-length finale, depending on how you think about it. It was originally broadcast as one piece, so I'll say double-length. Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls. This is the big finale of the overall series, and I have to say, what a splendid finale for a TV show. It just does everything you want for a show like this. It ups the stakes, makes everything personal, gives all the characters a moment to shine. References all the long storied history of the show, going back to the beginning, changes things in permanent ways, gives closure to all your major characters, and yet still feels like there's a potential for a story to go on into the future with hope. Good stuff, man. I mean, this is a great show in general, which is, of course, why I chose it for the rewatch. But, wow, what a finale. This is good stuff. I mean, I've talked a little bit about, in Weirdmageddon Part 1 and 2, that I like how, as a big climax, as a multi-part climax, the show isn't afraid to kind of really go hard with the stakes of changing everything, making everything look different, the environment's different, characters are in different costumes, and really introducing like some like kind of scary stuff, really, with the giant monsters. There's some body horror stuff going on with various weirdness transformations. But boy, it's just, the finale, it wraps everything up in a marvelous way. I'm so pleased with it. And I think actually that as good as the show is through its run, I think a big part of why the show is still so fondly remembered, including by me, is just because it ends so strongly. That is definitely something that's true of a lot of stories, is that the ending really is important. Beginnings are important so that people continue and keep watching, of course, right? Because if a bad beginning, why would you continue? But an ending, even something that you like most of the way through, if it has a bad ending, that spoils what came before. And you could have a show that is, kind of mediocre, middle of the road, or maybe uneven, but then it has a really powerful ending, and you remember that. But then a show like this one, to be good pretty consistently throughout, and then have a spectacular ending. I know that when I chose to do this show, part of why I remembered it so fondly and thought it would be fun to talk about is because it just has such a great ending, I think, as a conclusion to the story that has come before. So let's talk a little bit about where we were at the end of the last episode. Mabel had been in the Mabel Land fantasy prison, but now has been rescued from there. She chose to leave it when Dipper, Seuss, and Wendy came to get her. And now, having emerged from that prison, they return to the Mystery Shack hoping to hide out, and discover that Grunkle Stan is there along with many other refugees from all different parts of Gravity Falls, both the humankind and the fantastical kind. So we have Multi-Bear there, we have gnomes there, we see some of the Lilliputians there, Celestabella Bethabel, the unicorn, is there, but then we also see that many of the human people are there several times, the clone boy band and Pacifica Northwest is there. McGucket is there. And so we see that they've all been hiding out and that Stan has kind of taken charge. Now, most of this finale is kind of doing something interesting with Stan because, of course, it sets up the big decision, the big surprise at the climax. But what we see here is interesting because, on the one hand, him kind of taking charge of this group of refugees is like a positive thing, but then it kind of turns because it's good that he has assembled all these people in this place of safety, and we realize we're reminded that it's safe from Bill's magic because of the unicorn hair spell that was cast earlier in this season. It means that none of the, weirdness magic can touch anyone inside the Mystery Shack. And so it's good that everybody's had this place of safety here, but now that the twins are back, they want to take the fight to Bill because, in particular, they want to rescue Ford because he knows how they can maybe defeat Bill. And a lot of the other townsfolk are hesitant, but then there's a conveniently timed news report from the pyramid where we see that everybody has been, turned into this throne thing, which is good in a couple of ways because on the one hand, it gives everybody else there in the shack a little bit more motivation to do something about that. But it also just reminds us as the viewers that that's going on because it's relevant, later. And it's just, establishes that it's not just Ford. Everybody has someone to rescue. Pacifica talks about, my parents are not the greatest, but they don't deserve that. And Sheriff Blubbs misses Deputy Derlin. Oh. And so it's everyone kind of wants to do something about it, except for Stan, who is kind of, I wonder if, his decision that, no, we've got it pretty good here. We're just going to stick it out, eating all this canned meat that's just labeled the brown meat, and then maybe eat the gnomes later is what he says. And it's, there's a nice little exchange where he mentions maybe the gnomes afterwards. And one of the gnomes is like, hey, I'm right here. And Stan's just like, shh, fear will make you chewy. That's funny. But I don't know that he would have dug in his heels quite so much if it wasn't all about them wanting to rescue Ford. Because as we establish a little bit later, Stan, even though he was trying to let the matter rest for the good of Dipper and Mabel, it's clear he still has some very strong personal feelings about how hard he worked to rescue Ford from the portal, only to get chewed out by it for it afterwards, and never a thank you. And now everyone is wanting to go rescue Ford, the hero, when, from Stan's perspective, this is all happening because of Ford. And now, because he went out and challenged Bill, now he's stuck. And so everyone wants to go rescue the hero when all of this is his fault. And he still has these lingering personal feelings, which there's a nuance to the way that the show handles that I think is really great, because Stan's feelings, while petty, are reasonable. Right? I don't think there is any question in anybody's mind when we see Stan behaving that way. We understand why. He's not even really wrong. It's more just that his attitude is unhelpful, right? But at the same time, his attitude is coming from a real emotional place. And it's just kind of a case of, can't you see the stakes are too high to let your hurt feelings stop us from saving the world? And to an extent, that's also true. But at the same time, we understand where his feelings are coming from. And I think walking that line with the Stan character is so important, especially as the story develops later. But in the meantime, we have everyone talking about, like, well, what can we do? How can we possibly get there? The only place that we have that's safe is the shack. If only we could bring the shack to them. But at the same time, that's where we've got McGucket, and this is where we get this whole delightful sequence that is just the sort of thing that you can really only do in a finale, or I don't know, you don't, it's not like you can't do it otherwise, but it's just, you take the shack, the thing that has been the home base throughout the whole show, and then you just transform it, and now Shackbot or Shacktron or whatever they call it in the show. I'm not sure they call it anything in the show, but the wiki, I think, calls it Shacktron. Anyway, turning using all of these different pieces and the work of all of these people to turn it into a giant robot so that they can take the safety of the shack with them to the pyramid, use that to distract Bill while some of the other people infiltrate the pyramid to get to rescue Ford and hopefully some of the other people there in the throne, right? And it's just great stuff, and we get this big, the exciting sequence of everyone working hard, working together, and it's dovetailed with this stuff about Stan's reluctance and his hurt feelings and setting up that he does still feel that way. And we have Dipper and Mabel actually talk to him about it. And they are stuck here too, because on the one hand, they do understand where he's coming from. But it's also true that he's being really unhelpful right now. And he's just being the stick in the mud. He's feeling left behind. He's feeling like nobody thinks he's useful for anything. He's not really even wrong at the moment, but it's also his reaction to that feeling is to kind of dig in instead of think about what he could do about that. And that's a very, that's a three-dimensional character response on his part. And so we have the big robot Shacktron confronting Bill's henchmaniacs in the big fight. We get some nice exchanges there. There's some great stuff with the Shacktron in general. Having one of the arms be the Tyrannosaurus Rex that was partially unbroken from the amber, so that just the head sticking out is the hand of the arm. That's amazing. That's awesome. And then the fun stuff with Seuss coming out on the loudspeaker to issue demands, but then kind of acting like an MC and or a stand-up comic doing crowd work, and Pacifier, one of the henchmaniacs, just saying, "Hey, look at you, cute little guy," and that Pacifier's like, "I have butchered millions on many moons." It's like, well, that's not great. I kind of liked you more before you talked. That stuff's fun. And then, of course, it's all just this great distraction, because, of course, the real plan, once they get close, is to have everyone jump into the pyramid, and we're following everything in there. So the fight continues outside while we have everyone else infiltrating the pyramid, and we find Gideon again, and he's been punished by Bill for helping Dipper to rescue Mabel by being forced in a sailor suit to basically do cute dances for all eternity. And we hear him say, "I'm so tired of being cute." And that is just such an amazing character moment for Gideon, right? Because that's been his defining character trait, is that he's this obnoxiously cutesy little guy, right? That's his whole shtick. And so for him to say, "I'm so tired of being cute," simultaneously feels earned, but it's also a big development for his character, even though obviously it's not something he can just easily leave behind entirely. But he is there. He helped them to his own detriment. Now he's being punished for it. But here he is again, despite, any lingering hard feelings he might have. He wants to help. He recognizes Bill is the greater threat by far, and we need to do something about it. And so he's helpful, and he gives them the instructions that Mayor Cutebicker is the load-bearing human in the throne, and that allows them to just pull him out, and that makes the throne collapse, and it makes everybody wake up, which is kind of convenient, but whatever, it's fine. And so that's another trope that we get to have in our big climax here, right, is working with the former villain to defeat the greater threat, right? And dealing with Gideon in this episode, what little we get from him is good stuff too, because what we have is him having gone through some of his own development and sincerely helping, but also not entirely leaving behind the creepy guy that he always was. So like when he gets to stand in this little zodiac spell next to Mabel, he's like, oh, I get to stand next to Mabel. And she's like, don't make a big thing about it. And he's like, I won't. Yes, I will. And he's just being creepy again. But it's fun. And he is actually helping, right? And that's a nice sort of way to tie a bow there, for that relationship that's been a big part of the series. And so in the meantime, they've rescued everybody from the throne. Most everyone else escapes to places unknown. It's not clear. They're running away so that, the episode can be done with them. All of the other people that are not part of our resistance force. Ford, one of the things I kind of skipped over a little bit was that Ford had been briefly brought out by Bill of his golden state to torture him so that he will tell Bill how to escape Gravity Falls. We learned in the last episode that there is some sort of a magical field that was keeping Bill from leaving the Gravity Falls area. What we learned from Ford this time was that Gravity Falls had this natural weirdness attracting magnetism that he had come there to study, and that's why there's so many strange things happening there, and that apparently that works so well that the powerful weirdness represented by Bill literally can't leave it. Now, it's a little weird that Ford so easily just gives up. It's like, oh yeah, there's a simple formula that could just collapse that, and I know it, but I won't tell you. And that's I mean, they have to get there for the show to keep going, I suppose, but it does seem like, wouldn't it maybe be better for Ford to suggest that he doesn't know how to do it, and he's like, oh, out of luck, and rather than inspire Bill to say, well, I'm going to torture you until you tell me. But whatever. We have the show needs to keep going. So in any event, now that Ford has been rescued, he tells everyone, okay, so here's the secret weakness. There's this human zodiac spell thing that we can do, and it's this ancient prophecy, and it'll stop Bill. And this is where we get this fun thing where, like, oh, there's these different symbols that need to be represented by different people. And so, Dipper has the pine tree, and Mabel has the shooting star from her sweater, and then there's this pentacle star from Gideon's Mystery Shack, and all of these other little things. McGucket gets in there because of the spectacles. It's a little weird that the ice and the spectacles are explicitly made like metaphors when, that could have been done by anyone like that, when the others are like so specific. I don't know why that decision was made. That seems like it was probably a writing compromise to solve some problem. But in any case, we have that all lead up. In particular, having Pacifica finally had agreed to wear a sweater from Mabel, and it had a llama on it, and so one of the symbols is a llama, and she's just like looking down at her sweater and just feeling like, this seems weird. I think that's funny. But then, of course, the lead up to this is that we're being set up for this. Like, this is the grand moment where we're going to defeat Bill by teamwork and love and friendship. But the last person who has to go in there obviously needs to be Stan, Grunkle Stan. And he's willing, but still reluctant because he's still pissed. And so he resists just a little bit, and he's basically saying to Ford, like, you want me to stand there, take your hand, and do what you want when all this is your fault, and you never even thanked me. And he's being reluctant, and Ford is not willing to consider, his feelings. And so he's like, how could you be doing this now when it's so important? That seems so petty. And he's pissed that Stan would do that. And so even though he gives him a condescending, yes, thank you, and then that's enough that Stan's willing to come in and do it. But then Ford just can't resist twisting the knife by correcting Stan's grammar. And that leads them to fight again and delay everything just long enough for Bill to return and disrupt the whole thing. So now it seems in the story of the show like everything has been ruined because these two brothers couldn't get along. Because we established already where Stan's coming from, right? That on the one hand, all of his hurt feelings are reasonable and understandable emotional reactions to the things that he's been through. On the other hand, how important, is it fair it is kind of petty for him to hold up his hurt feelings as something that need to be catered to before we can save the world, right? So we can understand both sides of that argument, but then we can also see Ford, who is on the side of saying, this is more important, but we can also see him being unempathetic, right? We can see him being petty in his own right. Correcting the grammar? Like, if all Stan needs is for you to say thank you, why don't you just say thank you and then be done with it and not have to twist the knife the way he did? And so it's the two of them we see, and I think the show shows us very effectively that the problem is actually not Stan. The problem is the two of them. And it harkens back to when we first learned of Ford's existence, and we saw the flashback episode that showed the two of them growing apart and the way they struggled because they were once so close, but then both grew to a point where they just really can't understand the other's perspective. And the two of them are both at fault for everything falling apart there, right? And so, everybody else has to run away. Our other sort of main secondary characters like Wendy and Seuss and so on get turned into these posters as Bill has returned. He blows up the little ring that they've drawn on the ground. He is looking now like his plan is to torture Dipper and Mabel so that Ford will tell him this secret spell. But Dipper and Mabel, by being as resourceful as they are, and especially using like this little growing, shrinking flashlight that they had from a previous episode, managed to get away a little bit, and they're still doing everything they can. And so as they run away and Ford and Stan are left behind, we see them realizing now twofold. One, they were so close to stopping Bill, and they ruined it because they couldn't get along with one another. But also seeing how close Dipper and Mabel are, and feeling that longing of like, we were that close once, what happened? And at this point, both of them recognizing their own failings in this and wanting to make it right, but not sure what to do. And they talk through some of like, well, is there one last chance? Well, okay, he's vulnerable in the mind plane, but what can we do? And it's all set up. We have Dipper and Mabel running off, but ultimately kind of they're hoping to reunite with everyone else, only to discover that the henchmaniacs have rounded up everybody else. They're hoping to escape, only Bill's right there, and they're captured, and it's too late, and it looks like the all is lost moment. Bill brings the kids back and says he's about to torture them, and that's when Ford, with finger quotes, says, "No, don't do it. I'll tell you what you want. I'll let you enter my mind and see this formula, but don't hurt them." And that's what Bill wanted all along, of course, right? And so it's interesting because when you rewatch that scene, knowing the truth, which is that Ford and Stan have switched places, you see there's a couple of shots where you see Stan holding the bars with six-fingered hands, which we know is actually Ford, right? And so I think that's a fun little detail that it would be super easy to miss, if you don't already know what's happening. But so Bill enters what he believes is Ford's head, only for it to, be revealed as a trick. Stan's in there. But I love how one of my favorite devices in any kind of storytelling is a scene where you kind of slowly realize that things are worse than you realized, worse than you thought they would be. And in this particular case, there's a lot of abstract discussion about like, oh, well, Bill's vulnerable in the mind space, and we have the memory erasing thing. So if he could be in someone's mind, you could erase him. But but Ford made himself, invulnerable to that. Like it's not going to work. And that's where this whole idea of how Stan can help, is that he can volunteer to do that by tricking Bill. And so Bill enters there, but then as that scene progresses and we have Bill slowly realizing how he's been tricked, and not only that he's been tricked, but that he is now doomed and there's nothing he can do about it. That slow realization. But then we also realize, to erase Bill, he has to erase everything. Stan has essentially just sacrificed his whole mind and all his memories to trap Bill, and we see him looking at a photo of his family burning up in this blue sort of mental psychic fire and saying, "At least I was finally good for something." And it's like I feel like I'm tearing up as I talk about this because it's so moving. And that's why it was so important throughout. First of all, that we've come to like Stan and all his foibles over the course of the series. But then throughout this whole conclusion, to have him be in this place where he's being crotchety and unhelpful, but we know that it's coming from a place of feeling unappreciated, and like he doesn't know what to do, he doesn't know how to help, and he thinks that nobody's willing to treat him right, to thank him for what he can do, and he's just frustrated. And so for him to finally be in this position where there's something he can do, even if it means sacrificing essentially what he, his life to save his family, it's an amazingly powerful moment. And then, we see what appears to be Bill being destroyed. And I think, especially given that we do end up getting Stan back, it always makes me think that there's just the tiniest little bit of a grain of sand of realizing that it's like, okay, well, if the whole thing was that we're defeating Bill by destroying Stan's memories, but Stan's memories come back, is Bill really completely gone? Maybe not, but certainly defeated in the moment. In any event, as Bill is destroyed, Weirdmageddon reverses and it restores the town to its, pre-Weirdmageddon state, which is, again, pretty convenient. but sure, why not? Like, we want a happy ending. It's fine. But is it a happy ending? And that's where we get this great moment where it's, it's everybody else having to realize, because Ford understands, because he knew the whole plan. So he is distraught at, having to lose his brother for this, but moved, finally, completely moved and thankful and grateful to his brother for this sacrifice and recognizing the heroism in it. And then for Dipper and Mabel to have to, and Seuss to realize, oh no, Stan is not okay. He doesn't remember us. He's, he seems like he's not unhappy, but it's a little bit like, there's, they don't make it heavy-handed, but there's, a little bit of a corollary on how sometimes as people get older, they can suffer these sorts of conditions that make them start to forget who they were and who the people are in their life, and that's heartbreaking. And so it's very sad, and it stretches that moment on. It makes us really feel like maybe that it really is just, what's happening. But then, Mabel just refuses to give up on him. And just like she was the one in, at the finale of, the fixing the portal, that whole bit where Stan had been made to look like he was maybe the bad guy who's going to blow up the world, she was the one that refused to stop believing in him. And so just like now, she refuses to believe that he's really gone. She shows him the scrapbook she's been making, and it starts to work. He remembers Waddles' name, even though nobody told it to him. And he starts to get his memories back, and he gets his memories back, and it's a happy ending after all. And so now we get a great extended denouement where we kind of wrap up all of the other dangling threads, where, we have Dipper and Mabel's birthday party where they're now technically teenagers turning 13. And it's fun because, there was a campfire discussion earlier on where Dipper was saying, well, the only present I really want now is to survive the summer. But now that they've got their happy ending and they're wrapping things up with this party, because it's simultaneously their party but also their last day in Gravity Falls, they have to go back home to California. It's the end of the summer. And so Dipper talks about wanting to, make a wish, but he talks about, what would he have wished for at the start of the summer? And it was, adventure and excitement and friends. And he realizes he got all of that. He got everything he wanted. And that's really touching. And so we start saying, what's the wrap up to everything? We have Mayor Tyler deciding that the town's approach to how do we handle what happened with Weirdmageddon is the never mind all that act. So basically just no one is allowed to talk about it. You're supposed to just say, never mind all that, or else you get tased by Sheriff Blubbs and Deputy Durland, who we get the most explicit reference so far to the idea that they actually love one another. Is it romantic love or is it a platonic, affectionate love? Well, it doesn't want to confirm that because it's a kid's show and on Disney. In any event, that's pretty funny. Although I will say, given that Tyler Kuepiker has been through the whole series saying almost nothing but get him, it's weird hearing him say actual whole sentences. But in any event, we also get resolution that, apparently the Northwest family has to sell their big mansion because Preston Northwest lost all of his money by investing in weirdness bonds, whatever that is. McGucket makes a lot of money by selling his patents, and now that he's less insane, and so he buys the mansion. That's fun. Toby, now aka Bodacious T, has decided to keep his whole new apocalypse aesthetic, which is fun. Let's see. We got lots of little resolutions here and there with everybody. So then we have, the sort of the inner circle, right? So we have Mabel saying goodbye to Candy and Grenda, and there's a fun bit about Grenda punching her own chest to stop her heart from feeling so sad, and then Seuss and Candy saying, "No, now punch my feelings away." That's all very silly. There's a fun gag where Mabel says, "I wish that I could shrink you all down and bring you home with me in my pocket, but that's impossible. Right, Uncle Ford?" And he kind of just goes, gives the, but that's a fun bit. And so they're all leaving. Pacifica, gives a gift of a golf putter to Mabel to, tie back to their mini golf adventure episode, and then a Ghost Harassers DVD to Dipper to, commemorate their Pacific Northwest Mansion Mystery episode. Stan and Ford decide that they're going to leave the Mystery Shack behind and go out sailing the world looking for adventure, just like they always wanted when they were kids, and like Stan continued to want even when Ford was going to leave. And that's great, and it's so heartwarming, but then it leaves the whole question of, but what about the Mystery Shack? Well, we're going to close it, and everyone seems really unhappy with that resolution. And in fact, Seuss goes up and stands up and says, "No, you can't close the Mystery Shack. This place is too important," and makes a big passionate speech. Then, of course, the immediate, reaction to that is Seuss is now under new management, and Seuss gets to wear the fez, and that ties back to another bit from the episode where everyone shrinks, where we see him wearing the fez at one point and saying "someday," and so yay, Seuss gets to run the Mystery Shack, and we see him later wearing the suit and the outfit with the eye patch and the fez, and he's running it, and it's great. It's so happy. And then let's see, just trying to think what else I want to just make sure we touch on. As they're at the bus stop, it's kind of fun that we get to the moment where Waddles wants to come, and there's this whole bit of like it's the animal can't understand what's happening here, and so it was like, oh well, trying to say, "Waddles, no, you can't come with us," but then Stan basically puts his foot down and says, "No, if I had to live with this animal all summer, your parents will have to live home." So we can only hope that that's a happy ending, that Waddles comes with them. But we have got, and we have Dipper gets a nice goodbye with Wendy, where she reiterates that, she doesn't have to reiterate the bit about, this is not romantic, but we have a close friendship, and I care a lot about you, and I wanted you to know that. And she swaps hats with him, which is nice. That's nice. And gives him a little letter that later turns out to be, just signed by everybody. And it's like, "See you next summer." And that's nice, too. And then, of course, one last bit I forgot. When we see Seuss running the Mystery Shack, we see that his online girlfriend, Melody, is running it with him. Yay! Another happy ending. And, excuse me. And so then, of course, we finish with, Dipper and Mabel together, now reflecting on their adventure together and looking into the future to face it together. And it's great. And we get just basically a happy ending for everyone. We get resolution of pretty much all the plot threads. We get a happy ending for pretty much every character. And yet it all feels earned. Great, 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 great stuff. This is a great show. I've been so happy to rewatch it and re-experience it in this format, and I'm just very glad that I did. So, mentioned this on a couple of other videos, but Now that we have finished Gravity Falls, I'm going to start a new rewatch series starting next week where I will be rewatching the classic anime Cowboy Bebop. So I'll see you next Sunday with episode 1 of Cowboy Bebop. And in the meantime, I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.